it's Black History Month, and I wanted to talk about 3 people I felt I really wanted to talk. There's like a lot more people who deserve to be talked about, but the person I wanted to start with is Martin Luther King Jr. Because 1, he's the number 1 person always talked about, but 2, there's a lot more to his story than is actually talked about. It's usually that I have a dream speech and that he was a pacifist. There's actually a lot more to it than that. And I wanted to get started on that. I don't think this will bother anybody, but I am going to have to use the word Negro. Any issue with that, anybody? Just
no, you're using it. You're
accurate. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, you're using it like not in hate. You're using it to, retell a story. So there's that.
Martin Luther King is known for being a pacifist. That he's and people are like, oh, he'd be a Democrat, he'd be this or he'd be that. I think people have misread him entirely because they're looking at the whitewashed version of his story. He's the one that they've created a version of him that the establishment can use to control. Because in reality, if I had to put him near anybody, I'd put him closer to a Bernie-crat. Because guess who actually marched with him? Bernie Sanders. Just figured I'd throw it out there. Because here's a specific letter. Now, this is a long quote. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen councilor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to the positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, and who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. We're seeing, and that's a tone that hasn't disappeared, and I felt that was very appropriate because you're seeing what's the Clinton side of the Democratic Party's response to seeing Black Lives Matter go. Support us, we'll do what you want, but you're going to have to be patient. That hasn't changed. Whereas you have like the Bernie-crat side of it saying, no, we kind of need to redo police reform yesterday. Yesterday would have been better, but we should do it now. And I felt that quote was a very important one to bring up. You got something you want to, Alan, you got something you want to start with on that?
You kind of said it. Nothing has changed. I still see it. What did he say? I'm paraphrasing, but wait for a more appropriate time. Every time that we protest, whether it's Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, that's not appropriate. If we march in the streets, that's not appropriate. If we riot, that's not appropriate. So it's like, wait for a more appropriate time, but there never will be a more appropriate time. So like you said with the Bernie-crat stance, it's like, let's do this right now. Like, it can't wait. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting and trying and trying. We need to do something now.
It's a very common trend throughout history that most riots are caused by unrest. And most of our time we're just saying it's like they're just being radical. They're just being, unruly. But in reality, it's just because we're like a lot of people are feeling like they're not being heard. And the more time that passes, the more that seems to be more fact.
Oh, yeah. Ultra added in is very good. MLK said, a riot is the language of the unheard. Another one of my friends said, and he was referring to it in the minimum wage aspect, but it's still true.
Yeah.
Our agreement with with the owners to not walk in with pitchfork and torches was that we were allowed to form a picket line and march back and forth. When you stop letting us do that, then we're going to go back with the torches or something like that. It was like a really butchered line. I apologize, but it's a similar concept. If you don't let us have our voice, you don't let us talk. Using the royal we, of course. I've been to protests, but I'm probably nowhere near on Alan's level. But I have been tear gassed. I live in Portland, so it's a lot easier to get tear gassed.
And kidnapped.
I'm still heavy, so I'm kind of hard to kidnap. I just plant my feet and can't move me. It's one of the good reasons to be a little overweight, and it's harder to move me. Yeah. MLK wasn't a pacifist. He did say that there was a time for violence. He just didn't feel that we were at that point. He felt that there was a better method and that we needed to approach it a specific way. I do want to add as the final note, because I just remembered I wanted to mention this. When people tell me what MLK died for, I get pissed off. Not because you're defining it, but because you're saying he died for something. He was killed for something. There is a difference. He was murdered,
yes.
He was murdered for something. He was assassinated. And he was you can go into all conspiracy theories and stuff like that. We have somebody in the Senate or House of Representatives who does enough conspiracy theories for the world. We're going to stop there on conspiracy theories on it, but you probably know them about the FBI or CIA being behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, speaking of which, you also got to look at when he was assassinated. He wasn't assassinated during his civil rights time. That's the interesting part. He was actually more assassinated. Okay, so they had the civil rights bill passed, and you had the amendments and all that stuff done. He was assassinated during what's known as the Poor People's Campaign. Growing up, I never heard about that. I honestly never heard that Martin Luther King Jr. fought for. He wasn't fighting for an ethnicity. He fought for the lower echelons of society as a whole. Which,
yes,
at the time, ethnicity did dictate a lot of that. I do apologize if that sounds bad, but that's actually the situation. He fought to raise the minimum wage. He fought for workers' rights. He fought against the Vietnam War, and it was when he was doing that. He already had a huge microphone. He started doing that. That's when he gets killed.
No, that's actually something that's actually what a lot of our history books actually skip over. When the people did the marches, actually, though the majority was black, there still were a lot of other people of like the lower class, still like a part of that union, and people of higher standing. Like it was like a mix of a lot of people, though it was majority black, and they were kind of like throwing out like more than just we want like segregation to end. There was like a whole slew of things. There was actually a list of things that they really wanted to change, but I guess like we'll take it one place at a time. We'll take it one.
Yeah.
We'll take it one.
It staggers me to think. And one of the things that staggers me about this is how long ago this actually happened.
Actually, that actually brings up one thing I actually want to bring
up.
So there's gonna be like this movie about one of the Black Panther members in his life, or in a certain part of his life up until when he died, and a lot of this inspiration that they're using is coming from like I think a video that they shot. I think it was out here in Illinois, because I am not too well versed in the history. Yeah. I just know that like of the video.
Oh, the story of the Black Panthers alone needs to be addressed, because that's another one that had been whitewashed and written in such a way to make them look like a bad group, and they're not. They never were.
Exactly. And that's like something that always fascinated me, but it's always like, even in like most forms of media, it's still portrayed as that, and it's like makes me like, because I grew up when that was kind of a thing. It's not like I said it or my parents were able to correct me on it. It was just sort of like a thing that most like people just was told. Yeah. I live in a very black community. Like that's actually the more surprising thing. No one corrected me until I looked that up.
Well, it's also entirely possible they were fed the same information too, because if they weren't directly involved, they would have been getting secondhand information.
No, but like the shocking thing is no, because here's the thing: I live in Illinois. I live in Maywood, where Fred Hampton and things like that. Like I am out here, and this is the information that's out there, and it's like not being presented, and that's actually quite shocking.
Go ahead.
Interesting fact on schools, I suppose. So all the textbooks that we receive, they're run by large companies like McGraw, and they're just after profit, right? So to gain that profit, they cater to their biggest clientele. And the biggest state in the country isn't Alaska. No one from Texas is going to believe you. The biggest state in the country is Texas. So a lot of our history books are written to appease Texas. So we're actually learning more of what Texas wants us to know. Mm-hmm. And Texas is known to be a pretty conservative state overall.
And that's probably why Michelle Obama was demonized for just Common Core math being brought up, because the idea that we had a standard and expectation was beyond everybody's. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
You're good. But that's really all I was going to say was the country, most of the textbooks that we're reading from, schools are reading from, are written to appease Texas and Texas's point of view.
The good news is Texas is starting to move more liberal as their cities get bigger, because guess what? Liberalness is in cities. Who would have thought that if you live around a bunch of diverse cultures, you get more liberal? Who would have thought?
Yes. But also, how long does it take to update a textbook? Because when I was growing up, I had 10-year-old textbooks.
Oh yeah, minimum.
And history changes a lot faster than 10 years.